So today we're talking about working in international PR, and I want to set the stakes a little bit. So I had a client one time that had a new product coming out that they were really excited about, and they had a process where, because the company was primarily an English speaking company, they wanted to put out their PR materials and their product announcements in English, and then when the translations in other languages would come out, then those would go out, which is a good process for a lot of reasons, except for in this case, they had named the new product essentially what a code word was that the Nazis used for poison gas during the Holocaust. And so this product had been announced in English with this name. And then obviously immediately people in Europe were like, oh my God, like we can't name the product this, we have to stop. And so we put a stop to those communications going out. We reached out to a lot of press and said, hey, we need to adjust this. This is going to be a change. You know, we called on our media partners there and said we need to pull this back. And they obliged, right? They were happy to and kind of understood the circumstances. And so the point here is just to show that when you're working internationally and across languages, the stakes are really high. It's not simply about maybe you don't use this word or that word, or something doesn't sound just right in a language. You potentially could offend someone, or you could unwittingly use a word or a term that could be very flammable. So with that in mind, let's talk today about working internationally and across offices, and start with the obvious. I'm from the US, the southern US, and Ricardo and Mariana, you're both from Brazil, but working in the US. So maybe you could start and just tell me quickly, how'd you end up in the US doing communications primarily in an English speaking country?
You can start, Ricardo.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think, like many, I want a slice of the American dream. It's just as simple as that. And I came to Chicago for grad school, and then a job and a relationship leads to one thing leads to another, and it's been 17 years now, and I'm an American citizen, and I'm both an American and a Brazilian. I've learned to have multiple identities and to be comfortable with that idea. So yeah, that's given me the opportunity to work in these cultural settings and have all kinds of experiences, successful and others not so much, in terms of translating and localizing and adapting content. So yeah, I've had my share of just projects and things that I had to really think about and put myself in put on my Brazilian shoes, and then other times put on my American shoes. So it's been a journey, yeah, learning journey.
Yeah, and I had a little bit of a longer path till I got here to the US. I am from Brazil, I'm from Brasilia. Studied there journalism, worked there for a long time, covering politics, and then I got this opportunity to work in Germany. I was learning German at that time. I think it's a it's a lifelong thing, German learning. But then I moved to Germany, worked for Deutsche Welle, this German broadcast, and worked there for the Latin American department for almost 5 years. But honestly, like working with different kinds of all other departments from different countries, and as a journalist again. And then I moved to the US after I met my husband, who's American, and we decided to live here in Chicago. And then I ended up at SE10 again, started working with on Latin American on the Latin American market with clients that have business in Latin America. And here I am. It's been what, 7 years?
Yeah, wow. Okay. Well, so, working at SE10, we're international, right? So we have an office in Chicago, London, and in Singapore. And most of our clients are international companies and corporations, and most of the work we do is global PR work, right? So we do have some clients that only operate in their region, but for the most part, we're dealing with international businesses, and we're working as global teams across offices on global PR campaigns. And so, digging into that process a little bit, I've been asked a lot of times, what does it mean to be an international PR? And right, so there's some cultural sensitivities you need to be aware of, that we'll get into, but first off, one thing I noticed when I started working internationally is process is a big part of it, and not something that a lot of people talk about, but you really have to have good processes and management and project management in place to be able to work in 7 or 8 languages at the same time. And Ricardo, you have a lot of experience with the process of working internationally. So can you tell me what that's like?
Yeah, of course. Process is really extremely important. All the stakeholders, everyone involved needs to be part of developing that process and agreeing on that process and following that process. I feel like we really need to stick to that when you're working multiple countries, multiple languages, and like you said, with multiple cultures, right? And sensitivities all around. So in my experience, it works better when we all agree on those steps that we take, taking care of. Primarily, we start with the English, and the English is the original, perhaps, language, in the source language in most circumstances for American companies. And then we work with people in country, in different countries, to adapt, to localize, to really culturally translate that content, which could involve rewriting, completely rewriting an article, or rewriting or rethinking a campaign that was perhaps developed in the US, and then we need to adapt it completely to a different country and make sure that it speaks to the people who live there. And how do we do that? We work with people in the country to make sure that that message resonates, to make sure that we're not using any words we shouldn't. And so, yeah, it's extremely fun to work in those projects, to see how content transforms into a different content, and takes a different shape as we move from the source of language of the material into different countries and regions of the world.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that, this process in working with local people. And language is so fascinating because it's so dynamic. We've moved from Brazil, like 10 years ago, and the language is already, like, I feel sometimes when I go back, it's different in many ways. Like, there is a lot of new words, especially because of technology, and new words, the way people say things, the way people write about things. So it's not something like static, that it is and it's that. And so that's why it's important for us always to think about how to literally translate the message to that target audience.
Interesting. So, I mean, Ricardo, what maybe you can walk us through some of the steps, right? Because I'm not sure everyone would realize what it entails to send a piece of content through a channel. So let's say we have a content hub, or like a digital magazine. Somebody gives you a piece in English. Now, there's going to be a lot of people involved, right? With translation, approvals, checks, and balances. And walk us through, like, one piece of content, what you might go through to get that published in 8 different languages.
Yeah, that's what we do. We do have content hubs and manage different websites in multiple languages, right? So each each article that goes into that is going to be vetted really by someone, preferably who is in the country that or in the region at least of the world that where the message is gonna be promoted. And we just need not only the translation.
Yeah. So you send it to a translation agency first, unless it's a language you speak. So first you're going to the translation agency and it's coming back to you, right?
Yeah. So
And then, okay.
we trust translation agency partner to do a good job at that first translation. And then what we do with that translation, that translation is going to be vetted in country with our clients and other people. So not only how the language is presented, but because we are industrial for the most part, PR company, we deal with very sensitive and very technical content that needs to be vetted by a product specialist in the country. Make sure that all those terms that we're using are used in the country, used in that language. They're current, like to Mariana's point, whether they're current. The language, all languages evolve continuously. So yeah, and then finally, we would get to a final version of that content that can go public, that can go live.
Yeah. So I know, one thing we've done to ensure a process goes smoothly is we create playbooks for clients, right? We'll just call it a playbook, and clearly delineating, here's the person that first approves in English, the product specialist, and then a marketing manager. And then when it comes back from translation in different languages, who does it go to as the product specialist in that country? Then who does the language check in that country? Then when the content comes back to us, we are triple checking that, let's say for all 7 or 8 different languages, that if it's a press kit, that the actual French documents are in the French press kit and the Spanish ones are in the Spanish press kit, right? Because if you're going to blast out a press kit globally for 8 different languages with images, FAQs, Word docs, there's just a lot of process ensuring that machine goes smoothly, right? So, I mean, Mariana, you work with these playbooks, right? I mean, do you think you use that playbook every time you go through this exercise?
Yeah, no, sure. It's always important. I think one thing of the process that we're talking is about like organization too, right? Like making sure that all the steps were clicked, and because some of the languages, I mean, I can, me personally, like I'm good with the languages of one of the products that we create, but sometimes we are dealing with a language we cannot even read, like you don't know what is in there. So it's crucial that we have this process in place, and a playbook, a place, a guide for us to make sure that we are delivering a good service.
Sure. So one thing that's probably quite obvious to anyone, right, is the sensitivities when you're working international. Famously, last century, there was a book called Kiss, Bow, Shake Hands that was about the intricacies of international business, right? Like, are you kissing your business partners, shaking hands, bowing, right? Very, very different languages. And it's certainly, I mean, I shared an anecdote of how things can go wrong, but internally, when you're working internationally, you have to be aware of some of these cultural sensitivities with your coworkers. So, for example, on a team I had that was working globally, this client had a dealer network, so they didn't go directly to their customers. There were dealers in between, and we needed to do a little bit of work communicating what the company wanted the dealers to know for how they should be presenting the brand and selling products, right? So kind of a mix of internal comms with PR when you have a dealer network, right? It's its own thing. And so we came up with this idea to have a dealer newsletter, so we could have once a month or every other month a newsletter that went to them with company news and things they should be paying attention to, rather than just hitting them with emails all the time and updates. It was we'll package a nice newsletter so it's something entertaining for them to read. So our person working in Singapore started this newsletter, and he reached out to dealers and got their buy-in and wanted them to be a part of it, let them know it was coming and that it was important. We did 3 or 4 of the newsletters, and then back at headquarters, client basically said, yeah, this doesn't really mean anything to me. You know, this isn't what my main goals are. I appreciate the strategy, but I don't know, you know, maybe our resources should be elsewhere. So I spoke to this gentleman in Singapore and said, you know what, I think from corporate, they don't really want to do this anymore. We should probably stop doing it. And he didn't want to let it go. And he basically was like, no, we just started this. I talked to all these people. Like, I need to at least give this a year or two. And me being an American, I was just kind of like, well, if it's not what someone wants, like, let's kill it, right? Let's get rid of it. And so someone else stepped in and said, hey, like, if he does that, he's going to lose face. Like, it's Asia. He kind of put his word behind it and said, I'm doing this project and I want you all to be partners, and he would lose face, right? And, or be embarrassed to just cut this project so soon after it started. And so for that, we said that we had to say, okay, well, we're just going to let it go, because not everything is always about the immediate results. Sometimes, a lot of times, right, business is relationships, and he needed to uphold relationships to be an effective communicator in that region. So that's just one example of how it's come up for me. And I'd love to hear if you guys have any examples of you know, working either with internal coworkers or with clients where you've had to be aware of certain cultural sensitivities.
I don't know if I have an example, but it is always in the back of my head because I know that we Brazilians are very informal and we are very touchy too. Like we hug, we kiss. So sometimes, and of course, I moved to Germany first, so I had a good place to stop and see, oops. First people was hugging like Brazilian way. People are like, oh, what's going on? Like strangers. I mean, people I was being introduced to. So this is something it's always in the back of my head, especially in a work environment, right? Like you never know. Sometimes it's like, should I hug? Should I just, shake hands? Yeah, it's something I've developed a system. Like I see what others are doing because especially like we are American company but we have international clients, so my head is I'm always a little bit confused, so I just check the space, the environment. Okay, people are shaking hands. Oh, it's fine to hug. Yeah, this is definitely something interesting because you don't want to be so impersonal because of course you want to build a good relationship, right? But you also don't want to go, beyond the line. Like you got to find a balance.
Yeah. That's a great point. In person is completely different than content or phone calls or video meetings. In person actually it's the stakes are a bit higher, right? I actually remember when you said that. It's funny. My first trip to London for business, and there was a woman who I had known for a year doing video chats with and phone calls and felt, so we felt like we knew each other. And the first time we go to meet each other, she went in for the kiss on the cheek, and I went for the immediate handshake. And basically my hand just went like boom, like right into her stomach, almost like a gut punch,
awesome.
Right? Because it just happened so fast. And we both had a good laugh about it. But yeah, that in-person communication is huge. And actually it's quite beneficial to meet people in person, isn't it? Right? Because you get a much better sense of how they communicate, and you can build a relationship a lot better. What do you think, Ricardo?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Meeting someone in person takes the relationship to a different level, right? Once after meeting someone, you get on the phone, it's a different interaction. You know that person, you've met that person, you've shared maybe a meal, right, with that person. So yeah, it's very beneficial. I was thinking of that we have the COVID, we have pandemic in the last 3 years that have changed a bit of how the interactions happen in person, right? The handshake and I don't know if the Brazilians are continuing to kiss as much as they used to, right, Mariana?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's a little more fist bumping. So it's interesting to think about that.
Mhm. So have you dealt with any cultural sensitivities in the past? I mean, particularly, you're a very international person. You've been to more states than I have, by the way. I'm an American, and you've been to like triple the number of states I have. So you're a world traveler. Have you dealt with any sensitivities?
Yes. So working with multiple language teams in different organizations that I've worked in the past, I just had the feeling and the perception that everyone is sensitive. Every culture is sensitive, in particular about their language and the way that things are communicated in that language. So I think between Brazil and Portugal, I think people in Brazil and vice versa don't want to be spoken to or in the form of content uh, when the content is actually coming from the other country. So I think it's just from my experience of working with different translators and communications folks, we all are a bit particular about our language, especially our native language, and it's sometimes we have flaws, sometimes we don't. We make mistakes.
Yeah. One thing I've learned working internationally, and I've had the chance to Latin America, Europe, like Canada, which, believe it or not, Canada is a bit of a different environment than North America. I have noticed that, like, fundamentally, though, people respect each other and treat each other nicely, and there are peculiarities. I mean, we go to international trade shows a lot, right? And then you have everyone from around the world in one place, and everyone gets along great, in my experience, right? The different groups, definitely you can tell who's who, right? Um, just like from my experience, like the Latin American folks, they want to have fun when they're at the trade show. That's who I'm trying to find at night after dinner, because they're singing and dancing and everyone's like getting into it. But I do find fundamentally, like worldwide, there is respect and manners, and people want to be nice to each other and communicate with each other.
Understand, because language is very much related to your culture, who you are, what you want, especially in the international environment. And Ricardo mentioned Portuguese from Portugal and Portuguese from Brazil. For example, it's rare, or basically we can't find Portuguese from Portugal. It's maybe hard to understand, but Portuguese from Portugal and Portuguese from Brazil are the same but different languages. They're you can tell by the way it's written that it came from a different country. So it's very rare to find in Brazil or Brazilian outlets texts written in like by someone who is versed in Portuguese from Portugal, because there is probably this protective thing, and it's very attached to your culture. So it's, yeah, I think it's understandable that translator adapters are very, very protective of our reviewers. In our case, like local people that we send to, it's like, hey, this is, it's not the same word for me as like having another language as not my primary language. I was like, well, but these words are like the same. Yeah, but there's this nuance, and we would like to use this second word instead of the one that you put here. So that's why it's so important to have this local source to tell you, yeah, that's that's the way you should go.
Yeah. Well, and you have to maintain those relationships with those local experts, right? So there's a
Yeah.
little bit of you needing to show some empathy and understanding when you're working on a piece of content with them, right? So
Yeah.
you're very much in listening mode at that point, and
Yeah.
adapting, right? And you've told me in the past actually that I guess people don't call it translating as much anymore, right? You said it's more adapting or
Ye-
adaptation or
Yeah, definitely. In newsrooms where you work like with international desks, at least the ones I've worked for, we call it adapting. Because many times
mm,
it's not a pure translation. There is a lot that if you really translate the way it is, it feels it sounds robotic. So
mm,
you kind of put the like the we say in Portugal it's seasoning, like the
Seasoning.
salt. So it feels, like more natural, and it's so funny because that goes for audio too. I remember some time ago when I was working as a journalist and we were adapting a video and we had to dub the video, right? Like to record in Portuguese. And it was a video about video games. And of course, there are many words in English. And I was already living some time out of Brazil. And I remember recording that video and listening to that again, which I hate doing, by the way, because I hate hearing my voice. But I went back. I was like, "There's something wrong here. I checked the script and there's something wrong." And after listening for the third time, I was like, "I'm speaking the English words with the English accent." We
mm.
have to say, instead of video game, you have to say video game. Instead of smartphone, you have to say smartphone, like a little bit of a difference so the audience can connect with you. Otherwise we feel like, a foreigner somewhere, somebody who doesn't know where you are, who's trying to deliver that content, and that's not ideal. That might not land well.
So, I mean, this question is for both of you, really, considering you both speak multiple languages and more than two, really. I maybe you might not consider yourself a expert in all of them, but you have a very good working knowledge of several different languages. How do you think that helps you in your role as a PR person in general? And I don't even specifically mean dealing with international content. What I'm getting at is you have some sort of extra sense of the craft of communication because you have to see it in so many different languages. So how do you think that's helped your career in general? I'll throw it to you, Ricardo, first.
Sure. It definitely helps. I get on calls often, and if I'm ready to speak, with guys in Chile or Peru in Spanish, they will feel more relaxed and more comfortable, and they perhaps will look at me as, I'm one of them. I'm from a neighbor country, and the relationship gets immediately a little warmer, and we people are usually, of course, more comfortable speaking their native languages. So it creates a different bond immediately. So that's helpful. It's helped me in my job supporting American organizations, mostly in Latin America, so that creates that bridge a little more easily.
Mm. What about you, Mariana?
Yeah, I would totally agree. People feel comfortable when they are comfortable, they talk more, they give you more details, you learn more about that story, whatever story you're trying to get from their person, either how a machine works or, you know, whatever. Like in our position as like writers of storytellers, it's very important to get this connection.
Mm. What advice would you have for people entering the industry, or maybe they're already in PR and international appeals to them? What advice would you give them?
Sorry, can I compliment on that answer too? Because
Yes.
yeah, now that we can edit. Um, no, I also think that knowing other languages start again. Knowing other languages also helps us to understand, I think, not it's because, as I said, it's not only the language, it's the culture. Like have been living in other countries and having contact with people from other places, it kind of helps you understand better what is going on, being more, having a sense of how things work, being more tolerant, but also like working better. To work, it helps, at least for me, I think it helps me work better because you are not set in that like little square, like it opens your vision and your horizons, and you see that, yeah, things can be done and said in different ways.
Mm. So what advice would you give young people coming into PR that might want to work in international PR, or maybe someone who's been in the industry that this appeals to and wants to make a change?
Well, I would say just bring your best self to work every day and be likable and be in good spirits. I think, of course, you get a lot more out of people and a lot more people wanting to work with you if they like you genuinely. I always like to start a conversation or a meeting with people that I haven't met before, asking what they do at the organization and where they are physically. Like, what town are you? Where do you live? Like, where are you in that specific country? And how are things locally? How are things? Sometimes people have a lot on their minds in terms of just what's going on in their immediate kind of universe. So I think it just creates an immediate connection. I am just naturally curious. I want to know where people live and how they go about their days, and how they approach their work, really. So I think I always take and that's a Brazilian thing, and that's a Latin American thing. I think you don't go straight to business. I think I heard from an American journalist who was interviewing business people in Brazil, and he said that he learned that quick that you can't just get to a meeting and you're offered coffee, you take coffee, you talk for 5 minutes before you get to business. You don't say, okay, let's get straight to it. That's a bad pass. Like, it's a bad move with someone from Brazil, that I know for sure. And I think that's the case in a lot of countries.
Yeah. What about you, Mariana? Any advice for people?
Yeah, I would think like, yeah, be open to what is different, right? Like this kind of thing, if you don't expect people or things to go the way you're used to, because people from different places of the world, they react and they think differently. Be curious, as there's so much to learn. I think PR, what I love about PR is that you are always learning something new. We always have a different client in a different industry, and sometimes things are totally, you never thought you were gonna be talking about it one day in your life, and then few months down the road, there you are, like sounding like an expert at a family's dinner. And be humble too. Be humble, because even with a lot of experience, I started in PR after having like a good amount of experience in journalism, but and then you're all of a sudden like starting something totally new. So you need to be asking and hearing, like ears open to hear what people have to tell you, to teach you. You're always learning.
Yeah. I think my advice for people that want to work in international PR is, well, for one, get ready for some early meetings and some late meetings, right? And in particular for North America, it means you're going to have some 7 and 8 a.m. meetings, because then it's the middle of the day in England and towards the end of the day in Asia. And I mean, maybe that's not obvious, but you do have to be a bit flexible in that, right? So working across time zones is always something you have to be mindful of, right? And so that might mean you need to get up at 6 a.m. and get the workout in and the coffee in to be ready for the, the 8 a.m. meeting. Not waking up 2 minutes before, right? Because you do need to be mindful that you want to be at your best whenever you're working. And so you need to build that into your schedule. And then I do think one thing that translates across all languages is good storytelling still, right? So it needs to be adapted, but the focus is still on what's a good story. What's the challenge? What's the solution? What's the before? What's the after? The cause and effect? And how do you tell that story in a human way with characters and showing people's expertise and building trust among an audience? So the fundamentals, I think, are still there, right? No matter what language you're working in. So being a good storyteller is paramount. And then you can always have partners and translation agencies and local people to help you adapt that content. But if you focus on telling a good story, that's still the most high value skill that a PR person is going to have. And then, I think being open to experiences, like you say, Mariana, so you'll get to travel internationally. And a lot of that, I think, means like letting go of control. You're not sure where you're going to be or what you're going to eat or, what the routine's going to be like. But if you let go and take it all in and live in the moment, it can be an amazing experience. And really, it's an amazing career to be able to work internationally and talk with people from around the world and learn about their cultures and hear their languages and see them at trade shows and have meals with people and dance with people sometimes, right? It's funny. In business, you end up with dancing with people sometimes. Strange.
Or in a bus where everybody's dancing, right, Damian?
Or on a bus. That's right. We have some good video clips of people dancing on buses. Yeah. I feel like it might take too long to explain that particular scenario, but hey, after the trade show and after the dinners, people have a drink or two. Everyone wants to have some fun because they're in a new country, or maybe they're in Vegas, or they're in Munich, or they're in London, and that's some of the best times to get to know people, right? And is the fun times at night, and the way Germans like to party is a lot different than the way Brazilians like to party, isn't it?
Yeah, but we all have fun together.
But we all have fun together. So on that note, let's wrap it up. And thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.